What's going on, guys? The Comics Kid 2099 here, and I have an X-Men book that I want to talk to you about. Uncanny X-Men, the good, the bad, the Inhuman. This is a very strange thing for me to talk about, because I remember about a year and a half ago, I made a promise to myself that I was not going to read any more of Bendis' X-Men work. And, in fact, I was going to try my best to just stay away from Bendis in general, because I do not usually enjoy his work, and I especially really hated the first two volumes of All New X-Men and the first two volumes of his Uncanny X-Men run. I felt like in 4 volumes of X-Men, Bendis had very little to actually happen. Basically, you had Team Cyclops and Team Wolverine, they would argue with each other, and then they would really get nowhere with their arguments. And that was basically all that happened in the span of 4 volumes, and that is inexcusable. And so I said to myself, I'm never ever going to read any more of Bendis' X-Men work, and if I can help it, any more of his work in general. Well, then I see this book at my local Books A Million. I mentioned last week that I got Origin 2 at Books A Million, very reasonably priced. I got this for like $5 or $6, not a very expensive book, and I thought, you know what, I'll buy it, and then if I really hate it, I'm not even going to do a video. There's no point in me just ranting and rambling about how much I despise Bendis for 15 minutes or 20 minutes or whatever. Turns out, I did not hate this book. I don't think that it's the best X-Men book that I've ever read, but this is leaps and bounds ahead of any of his other X-Men stuff that he had done up until this point. So basically, instead of this being a storyline, this is 5 completely standalone stories, more or less. And I should go ahead and mention, it's Uncanny X-Men 14 through 18. So, like I said, 5 standalone issues. The first issue focuses on Benjamin Leeds, who is one of the students at Cyclops' new Xavier Institute. And Benjamin Leeds, up until this point, we were led to believe that he was basically just a shapeshifter. It turns out he's got a little bit more going on with his powers than that, and this issue kind of just explores how his powers are going to be very beneficial for the X-Men. And we get to see him go on this very dangerous mission that Emma Frost sends him on, and then it turns out that Frost, Magic, and Cyclops were all kind of in on him being on this mission. But it's a very interesting issue that kind of shows this kid who thinks that he's completely useless and doesn't serve a purpose, and then we're told that he's possibly one of the most powerful, most important X-Men on the planet. And I will say, I hate it whenever comics do this, when you have a character like Jubilee who has a very useless power, and it's very clear to everyone, writers, creators, and fans, that this character has a useless power, and then the story says that they are one of the most powerful mutants around. I don't like it when they do that, and they kind of sort of do that with Benjamin Leeds, but whatever, it is what it is. So the next issue that we get is an issue that is kind of an homage to an issue from the 80s, the Ladies' Night Out issue, right around the time when the X-Men were living in Australia in the 1980s. Chris Claremont and his fellow artists, I don't remember who the artist was on the Ladies' Night Out issue. It might have been Mark Silvestri, but he did a Ladies' Night Out issue and then a Guys' Night Out issue. And the Guys' Night issue was done by Rob Liefeld, but I think Mark Silvestri did the Ladies' Night issue. But anyway, here in the present day, we've got another issue that is kind of a sequel / remake of the Ladies' Night Out issue. And this is Emma Frost, Magic, Jean Grey, the 3-in-1 girls, Tempest, I want to say Kitty Pryde went with them. Basically, all of the women who are part of Team Cyclops at this point, they all go shopping just because they don't have any clothes and they're really bored and they're kind of getting cabin fever in this old Weapon X facility, and so they want to go out and just hit the town and paint it red and just have fun. While they're out on town, they find this guy who is a Latvian guy. He is an Inhuman. He has been infected by the Terrigen Mists, which I guess is a thing from the Infinity storyline. It mentions that briefly in this book, but it doesn't really say anything about what happened in the Infinity storyline, which is fine. I didn't need to read the Infinity storyline to understand that a Terrigen bomb went off and this guy is now an Inhuman. And the girls are all thinking, okay, we need to bring him back to the school, and they're like, yeah, but he's not a mutant, and Emma's like, yeah, but that doesn't really matter. And then this guy, it turns out that he hates mutants, he's really disgusted by all of them, and he makes them all pass out, and then these AIM scientists come and they kidnap him. AIM, in case you didn't know, Advanced Idea Mechanics, they kidnap this guy, and they're like, no, let's just leave the mutants here on the ground. And I have no idea if AIM kidnapping Inhumans, if that's part of Bendis' X-Men run, or if that was something that was going on across the Marvel Universe at this time. And that's one of the minor problems that I had with this, is that it's not made especially clear if this is going to be a subplot that will be later picked up in one of his X-Men books, or if this is something that was happening happening all over the place, and you're just supposed to be knowledgeable of the Marvel Universe and understand that that's what's going on. The issue after that, we get an issue that focuses on Magneto, and we found out that Magneto has just kind of been disappearing whenever he wants to. Cyclops has no idea where Magneto is going off to. We find out in this issue that he has an alliance with Dazzler, agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., and she tells him that he needs to go to Madripoor. In Madripoor, she tells him that a new mutant nation is being formed, and it's going to be kind of like a cross between Las Vegas and Genosha. He goes to Madripoor. He finds out that Agent Dazzler is actually Mystique, and she is the one who's kind of trying to lead this new mutant nation in Madripoor. I don't really understand what Mystique's motivations here are. Mystique has never really struck me as the kind of person who is very interested in mutant rights and fighting for mutant kind. She's always been the kind of person who is more interested in her own needs. Whatever her own goals are, that's what she's interested in. And sometimes that means fighting to protect her adopted daughter Rogue. Sometimes it means fighting because she's insane. She's written differently over the years. In this case, she's acting like she's very interested in helping mutant kind, and she wants Magneto to help her help mutant kind. It doesn't really make any sense with the way her character was presented before. Speaking of the way her character was presented before, this is one of those things where I have a feeling Bendis is not as familiar with X-Men as he wants us to think that he is, because he's acting like Mystique and Magneto have this long-running working relationship when they really don't. Before the movies, I don't think Mystique and Magneto ever worked together one time, and then this book is acting like they have worked together a lot over the years, and now she's trying to rekindle that working relationship, and Magneto basically kind of goes insane on all of them, and he flies away, and then the issue ends with Cyclops saying, "Hey, where's Magneto?" And we don't really know what happens next. Does Magneto come back? He doesn't come back in this book. At some point, I know that Magneto gets his own solo series, which is very good. You should check that series out if you haven't already, but I don't know at which point Magneto decides to leave Cyclops' Uncanny X-Men book. At this point, he's barely in this book at all. It almost feels like he doesn't even need to be in the book at all, because this issue, it doesn't really have any resolution. Magneto finds out that Mystique is actually pretending to be Dazzler and she's working with S.H.I.E.L.D., and he finds out that she's trying to start up the new mutant nation on Madripoor, but he doesn't really do anything with this information. There's no resolution to this issue. The next issue is a really interesting one where Magic takes all the students except for the time-traveling teenage X-Men from the past. She takes all of the other students and puts them in the middle of this really strange, quirky area in Montana. And if you've read Uncanny X-Force by Rick Remender, you know that this is the place that Archangel, spoiler I guess, the Tabula Rasa place, where he evolved this little town in Montana for like 130 million years, while only a few seconds passed in the real world. And so there's all these strange animals and strange plant life and stuff. Well, Cyclops, he has Magic drop off all the students in this area as a training session, and he wants to see how they will handle it. This is completely 100% Batcraft insane. It reminded me a little bit of in Wolverine and the X-Men when Wolverine took the students to the Savage Land on a field trip, and you might think that that was a really bad move on an adult to do something like that, but at least Wolverine was adult supervision for these kids. Cyclops just drops all of these kids in this weird 130 million years in the future forest and just hopes that they survive. That's extremely crazy and insane. Well, anyway, one of these guys, I don't even remember his name. I think his name is Hijack. He actually has a cell phone. And one of the other students says, "You're not supposed to have cell phones." And he says, "Yeah, well, they dropped us in the middle of a forest, and I'm going to use my cell phone to try and figure out where we are." S.H.I.E.L.D. agents come, and they're all going to try and arrest these kids, because apparently S.H.I.E.L.D. just arrests mutant teenagers for some reason. And then Cyclops has all the kids brought back to the school, and then he fires this kid, Hijack, for having a cell phone. He says, "I told you not to have cell phones. S.H.I.E.L.D. can track cell phones. Now you're going home because you made a mistake, and you're not even acknowledging that you made a mistake." This is a really weird issue because I don't think Bendis actually did anything with this character Hijack in between the issue where he introduced him and the issue where he gets rid of him. He's just hanging out at the Weapon X headquarters. He doesn't actually do anything in any of the stories. I think you could have done this very quirky, offbeat issue where all of these kids are dropped off in the middle of a forest without having to have Hijack there just to be fired. It seems like the only reason that Bendis actually introduced this Hijack character was to fire him later from Cyclops' group. group, and I think that you could have done this issue without having to have a requisite firing at the end of the issue. You could have had all the kids do a really good job surviving in the middle of this forest without one character who's a complete clustercuss and doesn't know what he's doing, and he has a cell phone even though Cyclops told him not to have cell phones. You could do this issue without having to get rid of Hijack at the end of the issue, because as is, it feels like a big slap in the face. It feels like Bendis is like, hey, I've got this character named Hijack, and we're introducing him, and he's going to be part of the X-Men, and then he gets rid of him like 5 issues later. That felt like a really wasted potential for this character, and I don't know if Hijack shows up later, like working for S.H.I.E.L.D. or something like that. I have no idea. But right now, the character feels like a big waste of time and space, like he didn't even need to be in this book at all. And then the last issue is a weird issue. It's kind of jumping around back and forth in time. First we get a few pages of Magic in the past training with Doctor Strange, because she went to like the 1960s to train with Doctor Strange, because if she went to Doctor Strange in the present day, he works with the Avengers, and then he would turn her into S.H.I.E.L.D., possibly. So she goes back in time, thinking that, well, he doesn't have any animosity towards the X-Men back in the 1970s or whenever, so I can train with him and I can be his apprentice back then. Then she comes to the present day, and then the rest of the issue is kind of focused on Cyclops. And then, actually, I am completely mistaken. All that stuff with Magic training with Doctor Strange, that was in the Ladies' Night Out issue. Never mind. Anyway, this last issue is completely focused on Cyclops. It's still jumping around in time a little bit. We get to see when Cyclops first meets Kitty Pryde after the events of Battle for the Atom. In Battle for the Atom, which I have not read, apparently Kitty Pryde decided that the 4 of the 5 time-traveling teenage X-Men from the 1960s, they are not safe at Wolverine's Jean Grey Academy, so she wants them to go with Cyclops, where he's going to drop kids off in the middle of this crazy Jurassic Park area, and he thinks that that's perfectly okay. And apparently Kitty thinks that that's more safe than keeping them at the Jean Grey Academy. So we get to see Kitty and Cyclops and their first interaction with each other after the events of Battle for the Atom. And Kitty threatens to kill Cyclops. She says, "You killed Professor Xavier. I said I would kill you if I ever met you again." Cyclops feeds her this baloney that it's not really his fault that Professor Xavier is dead. And you could say that it was the Phoenix Force that took over Cyclops' mind and made him be the one who killed Professor X. My problem is that Cyclops was the one who wanted the Phoenix Force to come to Earth, and he's the one who absorbed the Phoenix Force, so it is his fault that the Phoenix Force came to Earth, and it is his fault that the Phoenix Force killed Professor Xavier, if you buy into that nonsense that it was the Phoenix Force who actually killed Professor X. I still think that Cyclops is responsible for that, but other people have argued that, so I'm not even going to get into that here. Anyway, Cyclops gives her this nonsense that it's not really his fault, but it kind of sort of is, and he says, "One day I will pay for my sins, but right now I want you to join my team." And she's like, "Yeah, okay." And then we jump back into the present day, and we find out that the teenage X-Men from the 1960s, they have all been kidnapped by aliens, and I guess that's going to lead into the Trial of Jean Grey crossover with the Guardians of the Galaxy book, which was also being written by Brian Michael Bendis. And Cyclops says, "Okay, we have to go rescue them. I promised that I would keep them safe. Let's go steal a spaceship." And that's how that issue ends. Overall, this book is not horrible. It's not as mind-blowingly awful as some of the other Bendis X-Men books that we've gotten, but it's not great. A few of these issues, they feel like they're just there to kind of take up space, and there's no real resolution, like the Magneto issue, where I don't really think that anything actually happens other than Magneto finds out that Mystique is an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. Also, the issue with the Ladies' Night Out. It's a nice little, we can see these characters interacting with each other moment, and then you have to throw in some superhero action, and nothing really comes of that. I don't know if that's set up for something later in this book or tying in with something that was going on in the Marvel Universe. I don't know, and the issue doesn't do a very good job of trying to help me figure that out. And then you've got the issue where Cyclops, I guess, decides that he's going to go rescue the teenage X-Men, and that issue just felt like a big waste of time because we get to see Kitty Pryde reconciling with Cyclops, I guess, but her reconciliation with him still doesn't make any sense when her whole motivation for switching sides was that she didn't think that the original 5 X-Men were safe with Wolverine and Team Wolverine. I don't think that they're much more safe here, where Cyclops takes children and drops them off in the middle of a crazy forest where dinosaurs might eat them. But hey, that's just me. Maybe I'm really insane for thinking that. I don't know. But anyway, those are my thoughts on this book. I liked a couple of issues here. A few of the issues I think could have been done a little better. Maybe they could have had an extra draft to kind of polish them off a little bit. But overall, not nearly as mind-blowingly awful as I expected after reading the previous 4 volumes that I read. So I personally kind of, sort of, maybe a little bit liked Uncanny X-Men, The Good, the Bad, the Inhuman by Bendis, Bacalo, Anka, and Rudy. So those are my thoughts on that book. I hope that you guys liked this review, and if you did, be sure to give me a little thumbs up, like, share, comment, and subscribe, and I will be back later in the week with some other videos, and I'll be back next week with more videos. So I'll see you guys in the future. Have a great rest of the day. Catch you later.